This is the reader version of the mastery transcript. And this is what a college admissions officer sees as a landing page, or an employer sees as a landing page when they receive a mastery transcript. So the quick explanation is and I'm going to project a little bit so the mic can hear me. I apologize for yelling. It is divided into 3 panels. This left-hand panel here, where you see the student's name, is a navigation panel. It's relatively static. And it allows you to drive through the transcript as you want to navigate it. It allows you to see a school profile link if you want to open it up. And what is permanently on display in the upper left-hand corner is the student's name and their statement of their learner profile. Essentially, they, just like with a LinkedIn page or a social media account or a resume, they look back in concert with the school and say, this is who I am. Right? This is the framework I want you to carry through as you observe all that I put on display for you. So that's the left-hand navigation panel and how it functions. It is worth noting that there is no USC type scandal, and not South Carolina. I'm talking the West Coast USC. South would never do something like that. But because everything that's published here, while the student does in fact live in this transcript, and one of the things that I think is so amazing about this transcript is it's not just a replacement of the static 4-year capture and look back of a transcript. It does. It's just another version of that, right? Oh, here's 4 years in a snapshot. This is something that a student lives in, that they navigate on the back end when they're loading data, they're reviewing credits that they're working towards, they're thinking of the rubrics and expectations for evidence that needs to be submitted. This is something that they're engaged with throughout their learning process. But nothing can be published for public display in the digital layered transcript unless the school signs off on it. So no well-intentioned parent or outside college counselor could say, this is a great thing to put in there and have it be visible.
When do they create that?
When in the process? It probably would depend on the school, but my sense would be the beginning of the senior year as they're getting ready for the look back and the preparation for the college admission cycle. So that's the left-hand panel. The center panel is what we call the credit profile, and this is where we have worked very hard to marry our idealistic philosophical position of nothing reductionist, a strengths-based, holistic view of an individual student with the pragmatic pieces necessary to allow college admissions officers to navigate this quickly. It will not surprise you that there have been rave reviews for the second round of college admissions, right? Once they get past that first cut, oh my God, to see real evidence of student work on display over those 12 to 15 minute reader segments is something they couldn't be more excited about. But the big question is, can you give us something that allows us to staff and function as we do now? As one admissions officer said to us, I hire 110 temporary readers every fall to count points. We have an algorithm and a scoring system. Can this still work in that system and allow me to do that? So this is where we're trying to live true to our mission of this idealistic belief of how schools can operate and work with kids, with this pragmatic, fundamental recognition that we're going to give you something that allows you to function as you're currently built.
What is 30?
Excuse me?
What is
30 refers to the total number of credits that this young woman has earned.
How is there a minimum, maximum?
I'll come back to that in a second because I do want to answer those questions and give you something to look at. And then this right-hand column where it says evidence is an interactive panel that basically matches where your eye is trained in the center. So on this first landing page where we haven't sort of gone into the credit profile in any way, we haven't explored it at any depth, the evidence that's on display is the exemplars of work that the student has chosen, up 3 to 5, that they think absolutely reinforce their statement of a learner profile. And they say, look, if nothing else, I really want you to pay attention to these. This is some of my best work. And they're all fully interactive. So if I want to understand what Kavita is talking about when she said, hey, look, I did this incredible work over the summer at a lab, and I earned one of my mastery credits for this as part of my evidence. Here's what I built. Here's the device I built over an 8-week period that helps detect depression and heart attack victims. And here is the presentation I did, not at a high school science fair, but at a professional conference, explaining my work. And you can see it right there, firsthand, on display. Okay? And this type of evidence is linked to every credit, and you'll see as we dive into it, it can be found at every level. But this is her chance to say, these are the things I'm most proud of, right? Of all of the work I've submitted, these are the best pieces that I want to share with you. So the credit profile. So here's what you're seeing. When you land here, you land on what I have taken to calling the radar graph. I don't know if that's the good official name, but it's what I've taken to calling it. And what it shows you is a number of things. First, for the Nueva school, it shows you the 6 mastery areas. You can see as I run the mouse over them, that are basically the sorting buckets for student growth. This is what Nueva has said, hey, when we teach to mastery, when kids learn to mastery, these are the categories that we're going to use to capture their growth in lieu of traditional departments. Some of them are content driven, you know, such as quantitative, technical, and scientific fluency. It's basically code for how much math and science have you learned. Some of them are very much skill-based capture mechanisms. Skills that oftentimes now are the things we talk about on our websites, but we don't really capture in any way. So those are the sorting buckets, and then within each piece of the pie, each line represents an individual credit that the student earned. So that's where the number 30 comes from. Each credit area, in Nueva's case, has between 8 to 12 I can statements that students can pursue. So I would broadly say the outer ring is the school's our students know statements. These are the categories of what they know to match the graduate profile ideally. And each credit that a student earns is an I can statement from the student. You'll notice that some of these lines are thin, and if you tie up here to the key, those are foundational credits. Those are credits that your school has said are mandatory for graduation. You can't get a diploma unless you earn all of your foundational credits. The thick lines represent what we call advanced credits. These are opportunities for students to pursue their interests, their passions, their curiosity. They are not mandatory for graduation. If you want to dive into any one of these credits, you'll notice that the right-hand display changes. So if I want to isolate citizenship and decision-making, because I want to understand that, I've now both highlighted on the right citizenship and decision-making, which includes the school's our students know statement. Here's what that means at Nueva School. When they say citizenship and decision-making, they look to capture growth. This is what they're talking about. It also highlights the corresponding area below and draws my attention there. If I want to look at a specific credit that a student earned, again, with a click of the mouse, I no longer get the broad definition of citizenship and decision-making, but I get the specific definition of the credit that the student earned. I can do this for any credit. Obviously, the non-labeled credits are foundational. The ones with advanced are advanced. And of course, under every one of these credits, and this is a prototype, so it's not fully built out, is in fact the evidence that the student submitted as part of the larger rubric of what they needed to do to earn this credit, with the evidence right there on display. So this is true for each and every credit along the way as students navigate this process. So you can see it's fully interactive and it operates that way. Anytime you want to go back to the main page, you just click on the mouse and it takes you there. The other part that we've included in this early version is sort of for 2 reasons. It's simply a course list. Number of reasons for this. Number one, many schools are currently and will continue to use the traditional course silos and courses as the way the school day is structured and modeled. And they can still teach to mastery because mastery, instruction, or competencies move across courses or even outside of courses. Sometimes they don't even happen in school where the growth is measured. But it doesn't mean you can't teach traditional classes anymore if you choose to, if you think that's the right way or it's something that you plan on maintaining. And what we've heard from public schools and charter schools in many cases is, hey, look, the state has a requirement of 18 this, 19 that, 20 courses. We have to be able to show those. And what we've heard from college admissions, for instance, one of our college admissions officers looked at this from an engineering school and said, I like this. This is really cool, like better than I thought. And I really have a sense of who this kid is, but I can't admit her to an engineering school unless I know how much math she's taken. And I know specifically what level she's at, even if she's wonderful. So the opportunity here is to say, look, we have a way to do that, and I'm going to show you a slightly different version, which is the one you're going to see later that you can play with, which captures how we do that. To be true to our philosophical mission, we're not sorting them by grade level. We're not sorting them by semester or year. There's no GPA. There's no grade. There's merely a completion date. So they're there, and they can be sorted in different ways, but all we're really providing is by department, oh, I see Kavita has gotten to multivariable calculus. She can absolutely handle an engineering school. Sort of the information they need, but there is no grade. There's sort of a balance in between there. So that's what we've provided in the bottom half of that, and we're continuing to build it out. And then the last thing is, here on the left, you'll see a link to the school profile. And I think we were all gratified to hear from colleges and universities that they do, in fact, want to understand the context for the student journey. I think there's a little bit of sense of like, do they really care that much about how you design your program and what you're emphasizing at your school? Or do they just sort of look at these numbers? And very strongly we've heard, yeah, we do care. We do want to understand the journey, particularly if I'm not the primary reader. So what the link does is it essentially, in this case, the Nueva link is not live, but with a quick click of the mouse, and this is one of our pilot schools, it allows you to have your modified school profile directly embedded in the transcript. So in this case, if I want to learn about Gibson Eck, I want to learn when they were founded, I want to learn about some of their demographic data, how their curriculum approach works, their unique course offerings. In some ways it looks very traditional, but then what it allows them to describe how they're approaching mastery credits. So I like this example because you'll see the language we use around foundational and advanced, but then unlike Nueva, who defined 6 mastery areas, and under each mastery area between 8 and 12 very unique credits with a different title, these guys took a different approach. They said, look, we're going to have 5 mastery areas from social reasoning to personal qualities, and instead of having a distinct credit, maybe 8 to 12 in each category, we're going to pick 4 key components for each that we think are growth targets for the entire journey. Just like an English teacher today would say, look, I teach analytical writing in 9th grade, I teach analytical writing in 12th grade. But I have very different expectations for a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old. So we're essentially saying, yeah, this is the model they've taken. So instead of having unique titles, they have these 4 themes that run across each competency area, labeled Foundation 1, Foundation 2, Advanced 1, Advanced 2. So if you took this model, and again, this speaks to the unique nature, and labeled it here, they would still have their 5 distinct categories, and then they would just have 4 credits labeled if the students earn them, reinforcing the same skill at a different level. So,
just to clarify, you said the word competency level. How do you measure the competency level in each one of those?
So the idea is that they would come up, level's probably the incorrect word. They would strictly define what it is they're looking for as the student continues to grow. So I apologize, yeah, even I fall back to the old language, right?
Yeah,
but yes, absolutely. So levels is probably the wrong word. Just the competency as they define it, but they've created a thematic approach to say these are the things that we really care about as a school. Here's what I'm gonna offer to you guys. First, I want you to keep this question in mind as you engage in this. And if you have a laptop handy and you're logged in, I'm gonna give you a link that'll let you go through a version of what I just showed you that is not, the only difference is the one that you can access and take with you is not fully interactive. You cannot open up the evidence samples, but it's sort of 4 pages that allow you to go, okay, what did I just see? What I want to think about. But as we sort of close out this session, what I want you to do is take a look at this traditional transcript and keep that framework of opportunity, not problem. And I do want you to say, well, what kind of works right now? Why does this thing exist? And what's good about it? And maybe what are some things that have bothered me? And keep those questions in mind as you go to that link, or even just recall what you just saw. I mean, you don't have to go to the link, but this is a link you can take with you. And as you kind of dance through what I just showed you and remind yourselves of what you just saw, take also a couple minutes to say, given what I just wrote down about the traditional transcript, what is it about that legacy transcript that this does better, that I like? Where do I have problems or issues or I'm not comfortable with what I saw or what I'm looking at? What I'm going to give you guys is try to give you about 7 to 8 minutes to log on and or just talk amongst yourselves. I mean, again, if you feel like, hey, I saw it, that 7-minute driving tour was sufficient, go back, make some comments, think about this question, and then I'm going to come back for the last 10 minutes and have us share out some of the things, both pro and con, that we're wondering about and worried about. But I'd love to take the last 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and I'm happy to stay afterwards, just for comments, thoughts, curiosities, anything that's discussion. And please, if you ever want to follow up, I actually mean this. I have the privilege of learning about a lot of schools and the individual challenges and opportunities that schools are having. So never hesitate to shoot me an email, even if it's just like, I don't know what we're going to do with this, but I'd love the rest of my admin team to see this. Can we get a couple minutes? And I have found the greatest thing, if you set a lot of meetings, I will tell you this is the greatest discovery. Some of you have used it. There's this app called Calendly. Just tremendous. So basically, I write you back, and then you just pick a time that fits your schedule, and off we go. So I would love to continue the conversation with anyone. But thoughts, feedback, concerns, excitements?
one thing that struck me was sort of the decisions that schools make around the mastery categories. Those decisions could present, will present very differently to the colleges. And so, will some schools resonate more with colleges just based on the decisions they made of what they're presenting there, and sort of how are you guys thinking about how to sort of solve for those differences?
It's a really good question, and it is something we, I think, have labeled as scale happens. How do you bring some cohesion to this? How do you bring consistency of expectations? So we do think that over time, those 5 or 6 categories are going to become very similar, and we've anticipated that at some point we may just say, look, we've heard a lot from all of you. We're building this library of credits and areas, and now here are the 9 categories you can use. Right? You get to pick 6 or 7. The transcript very comfortably displays between 4 and 7. So I don't think we're ever going to say it has to be these 6. But I think it's pretty likely that we're going to say, here's what we're hearing from you guys. Let's consistently group them so that college admissions officers know what each category means generally. The individual credits, I think we're always going to leave up to the school. In part, do we want to be more content heavy and still traditional content we're tracking, or do we want to put more emphasis on some of the skills or social emotional learning? But it is an option. And one of the things that we've talked about is in the early stages, you have almost like a membership formulated accreditation standard, where some of the member schools say, okay, before you can start using this, you have to submit your credits and your credit review process. And we need to say it's okay. Does it eventually go to a third party, almost similar to an SAIS, to bring that comfort that these are sort of valid credits?
How does it apply to lower schools where you need to know their competency levels in reading or comprehension and fluency?
So it's a conversation that we encourage our member schools to do K-12. This is targeted as a high school transcript right now. So to some degree, there's an element of, well, if you guys want to continue that conversation that's already ongoing, you have the flexibility to measure that as you see fit at the lower school level. We're having a conversation at the end of this January at the board meeting about whether we start to allow middle schools to become members. A couple folks in here have asked about that because there is such keen interest and energy there. Probably the discussion is going to come down to, is 3 years of clearly articulating that this is to change education and specifically change high schools enough time to now allow K-8s in without potentially undermining our own efforts and having schools go, this is phenomenal, but now I'm going to stop it at 8th grade at K-12 schools.
Then as your former boss, I give you an A on the presentation. Curious about how the rank and file admission officer, say in a mid-sized university, who isn't an educator, is matching up to some of the work, like the example the students work on climate change, and how that person looks at that work and sort of has a basis for knowing whether it's a credible way of, whether it's good.
Yeah.
If these people are, say, 2 or 3 years out of college and they were a econ major, whatever they were.
Yeah, and that is, that in many ways is the challenge. Right now, I think this was not that difficult of a conceptual sell to the deans of admissions. Like, hey, I get this, but they were very quick to say, I'm not reading 75 files a day. So I think part of it is for instance, with the files going out this year, making sure we get to those schools ahead of time and say, let us show you how it functions. Part of it is, if you see it on there, whoops, no, there it is. Part of it is ideally creating a scenario in this center section where people learn that by looking at the shape of a student and understanding the context of a different school, they can over time develop a sense of, is this a viable student that we'd like to learn more about or not? Part of it is just hoping that over time, as more and more of these things come, and I will give you my personal opinion, I think for the schools that are using these in the first 3 to 5 years, there will not be much worry, because I think the novelty aspect will be so high that when only 7 to 25 of these are showing up on your campus, the opportunity to dive into something like this and really get to know a student is going to be very high. I personally think the challenge will be when we scale and hundreds are going to University of Georgia. The dean at the University of Florida, Zena Evans, couldn't be a bigger fan of this, and she's so excited. But the reality is, when 5,000 show up, what can she do with that? So part of it is just getting out, educating people, figuring out and listening to them to say, well, this is how I read it, this is how I shortcut it, this is how I sorted. and go, okay, are we comfortable with that kind of sorting or are we not? And then ultimately saying, well, what are we willing to provide you and what are we not? And then maybe the biggest hope is ultimately, while we don't expect anyone to change their admissions process in the near term, maybe the sense is when you have different information, will you look at admissions differently? So instead of having, you know, a quickly trained reader put a number on a transcript and in 2 minutes or less, and then have 3 people come back later and each spend 12 to 15 minutes, maybe the real answer is you have a trained reader spend 10 minutes the first time because you have a very different set of information, and instead of narrowing it down to 8,000 files to get to 2, you narrow it down to 4,000 files to get to 2. And so maybe there's ultimately a way to just look at the process differently. But I don't have a perfect answer of like, oh, we've solved it. The best I can say is we're listening, we're talking, we're saying, how do you do this? How would you do this? What don't you like? What do you like?
So just a question about kind of a world where learning happens in schools, but in lots of other places too, and the degree to which this has data interoperability with micro-credentialing systems that are out there, and sort of who ultimately owns kind of this. Like right now it's kind of schools and then colleges. Does this then get transferred in terms of ownership to students who become employees for really their whole lifetime?
So it's a phenomenal question, and you can take it to the compliment. Very smart thinkers ask that question from time to time. So we don't, at the moment, right now the answer is no. We don't see this as a lifetime portfolio that follows you everywhere. This will be tracked and recorded. It can be put into a PDF format, and it'll be stored for the 7 legal years that it's required to be stored, and then it'll go off to some, you know, other place that we all stick our transcripts today. Early on, there was a for-profit company that came to us and said, we will give you exclusive rights to the K-12 IP, and we'll sign an agreement that says as much as long, and you know, we'll pay for everything as long as we get the rights for everything after that, because they were looking ahead and saying, oh, big business, right? I can fill that intellectual property void and I can create the lifetime skills portfolio that people can carry with them forever. So it's a really good question. Who knows where we will come to that? But at the moment, we are trying to say, nope, it's to capture the high school journey. Could a student revisit the evidence just like they can revisit a transcript now? Yes. Could they build on it beyond? At the moment, that's not the plan.
Are you facing any challenges with larger colleges using artificial intelligence for the transcripts? That's one question. And second is, are any of your schools using adaptive learning to prove the mastery on their transcripts?
So the answer to both in the near term is no. We have actually had folks approach us to say, boy, if you created an AI component to this, you could really create incredible, you know, sort of a third-party reader for your evidence that could validate it as consistency, et cetera. At the moment, our goal is to not sort of bring AI into this, and I don't think colleges have yet gotten to the point where we've heard them definitively say this is going to happen. I was talking to sort of the vice provost at Cornell the other day, and he brought up that, you know, gosh, in 5 years, this transcript could be perfect because we will have these systems that allow us to mine the data that you're providing and really give us a sense of student growth over time and see patterns that you guys might not even see with the way it's structured. So I would say it's more of that opportunity than necessarily a problem. If that succeeds, it'd be probably an individual decision for each school to make internally. Like, do you want to adapt this on a K-12 campus to make that happen? But I think it would only help the viability of something like this. But it's another really good question. All right, so I know we're a little over time. Thank you so much for coming. Please don't hesitate. I have a card if anyone wants it, and I'll hang out for any questions.